Thank you, Sam. Obviously, this is John, and hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. So it's going to happen at your financial institution. It's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month, but it's going to happen. You're going to lose a customer because nothing, as the old saying goes, is so certain as death and taxes. So your customer, you have a customer who has died, and what you need to know is how it affects your bank. What do you need to do in order to react to this event in someone's life in order to both protect your bank and to do the correct thing with regard to the customer, his or her estate, and the individuals that the customer has left behind? So today we're going to talk about some common after-death issues that are ranging all the way from what happens to the authority of agents or powers of attorney to how you deal with treasury checks and payable to deceased payees. We'll talk about, we'll do a fairly comprehensive review of some of the problems that you're going to face on checks and automated clearinghouse transactions and deposit accounts and safe deposit box and best practices for avoiding or dealing with those problems. Now, on page 1 of your handout, you see a long list of bullet items that we're going to be covering today that starts with a basic question about whether or not your bank has authority to pay checks after someone has died, and goes all the way down to questions about ACH items and notice of their death. And somewhere in between those discussions, we'll be talking about things like payment of funeral expenses or how a death affects sole proprietorship accounts and so forth. We won't necessarily be following this order. However, we will be covering all of that material, and we plan on covering even more. And the first thing that we're going to talk about is one of the reasons, one of the sources that you might have for learning of a customer's demise. And Mary Beth, what about obituaries?
Well, John, a financial institution isn't required to check obituaries, but there are many good reasons for doing so. Even if you do so, it's not a foolproof way to catch every customer's death because of the mobility of customers and the fact that in some local papers, such as mine, they now charge an arm and a leg to publish obituaries. So all you really get for free are death notices, which are one-liners and very easy to miss. But let me illustrate what the upside and the downside would be to checking obituaries. By just giving an example that arose with a bank recently that John and I spoke to. The bank had a customer. The bank was located in State A. The customer had relocated to her vacation home in State B and was spending more and more time there. She had come into the bank at some point in November of 2009 and reported to the bank that she believed that there was some fraud that was either going on with her account or was going to go on with her account. Specifically, she said that she became aware that some of her blank check stock was missing, and she was very nervous about it. She believed that her daughter had stolen the checks, and so after speaking with the bank, she followed their advice and she closed the account. She opened a new account, and things were just fine as far as the bank knew. The bank sent her statements every month. They didn't get returned. There were transactions on the account. Fast forward to June or July of 2013, the bank gets a call from the Social Security Administration, and they basically said, although probably a little more formally than this, "Hey, is your customer dead?" And the bank said, well, no, not that we know of. And they said, are you sure? So they pulled up the records on the account, and they looked, and they saw that, no, consistently deposits had been received into the account via direct deposit, and that activity was being conducted. And the Social Security Administration said, okay, but we think she may be dead. So the bank decided maybe it better do a little bit of investigation on this, and they started doing some research. There had been nothing in their local paper, and it was a small town, that related to the death of this individual, and they kept researching until finally they found an obituary for her online. She had died approximately a month to a month and a half after she had last been in the bank. So you can imagine what happened. Apparently, a new debit card and a new PIN were sent out on the new account per the customer's request when she had been in that November, and the daughter who continued living in Mama's place in Bank B got the debit card, didn't tell anybody about the death, and the funeral home evidently dropped the ball. So it took Social Security Administration from December of 2009 until June or July of 2013 to realize that she was no longer among the living. And then what did they do? Well, the bank decided, okay, we've immediately got to hot card that card, and we've got to freeze the funds in the account, and we can go ahead and call Social Security Administration and tell them, apparently she is deceased. This was the first we knew about it. It was your call to us that triggered our inquiry into the matter, and they declined to process any more direct deposits to her account. Social Security Administration is taking the position that the bank owes for all of the Social Security direct deposits that went into the account that were unearned by reason of the customer's death. So Social Security Administration has mounted a reclamation through the Treasury Department, and the Fed, the bank, has had to protest that, and there's very little way that it could have been avoided in this instance because you had a mobile customer that had the gall to die out of state. If you can imagine, I'm being facetious about that. But the bottom line is knowledge is almost always preferable to ignorance. So if you can find out at the earliest possible time that one of your customers has passed away, you can take the necessary steps to protect your bank from lawsuits and losses. And so one of the ways that historically banks have done that is by reading the obituary pages and funeral notices. Now, occasionally that leads to some pretty interesting results. But as I said at the outset, is there a duty? No, there's not a duty. Do John and I believe that the bank in the scenario that I just mentioned to you will ultimately prevail? Yes, because the bank knew nothing of the customer's death, and even when Social Security called, they didn't say your customer has died. They asked, is she dead? They didn't know either. They simply suspected, and so the bank should not have a duty to ensure the ongoing life of their customer. And in a situation like this, clearly the wrongdoer was probably the daughter, and that's who Social Security should go over. But depending upon the size of your institution,